Pokémon Legends Z-A is about to come out and it's a big deal. It's dropping the classic turn-based formula and taking a turn towards a full action RPG format. But what if I told you that's not even why it matters? That the reason it's so important is bigger than any one entry in the series. In my last video, link in the description, I talked about how groundbreaking this new format could be for the future of the Pokémon franchise and why it's so important. But there's one thing I never touched on: Game Freak themselves. Pokemon is the most successful media franchise in the world, but its corporate strategy is lazy. And despite never changing up the formula, it is seeing record success. No matter how poorly received these games are, they print money. So in a series full of stagnation, what does Pokemon Legends Z-A mean for the future? And does Game Freak even care? For just a moment, I want you to imagine that you're a game developer. It's your job to, from the ground up, produce a new mainline entry in a beloved franchise. And you do a horrible job. The critics hate it, the fans hate it, it runs terribly, it looks ugly, and it feels empty. Surely you'd feel bad, right? It sounds like a disaster. But what if despite all of the failures, you make a jaw-dropping amount of money? What if it's one of the best-selling games in the franchise's history? Would you feel as bad? This is the problem with Pokemon these days. There's a clear repetitive formula for these games and absolutely no incentive to stray from it. Sword and Shield had a middling reception, but it sold 26.72 million units. We just talked about how Scarlet and Violet went, but they still sold 26.79 million. Even Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which weren't even made by Game Freak but followed the formula to the letter, sold 15.06 million with very average reviews. Pokémon Legends Arceus was a triumph. I made that clear in my last video and I'll make it clear here. It was a massive success critically and creatively, and we all saw it go up against the best RPGs of the year at the Game Awards. But this video really isn't about creativity, it's about courage, and if you're an executive staring at a spreadsheet, it's a different story. Arceus sold a very respectable 14.83 million units. People loved it, but notice the disparity? Compare that 14.83 million to the 26.79 million of Scarlet and Violet. That's not a small gap, that's 12 million units of difference. It's obviously not the fairest of comparisons because mainline games will always have bigger marketing efforts and there was no dual release. But that executive staring at the spreadsheet doesn't really care. They just see $720 million telling them there's no reason to innovate. And with Z-A, it's a step further. Arceus' biggest risk was still a calculated one. Game Freak was already interested in integrating an open world into their games before it ever came out. The Wild Zone was a beta test. They knew there was interest there. But with Z-A, there's no beta test. This change alters the core of the Pokemon gameplay experience in a way that has simply never been done before. The risk is higher and there's plenty of incentive to just leave it in a spin-off. So what actually needs to happen to bring real-time combat to the mainline series? When it comes down to it, there are two potential timelines here. The first would be if Z-A is an overwhelming success. People absolutely love the real-time combat, and more importantly, it shows in the sales numbers. It outsells Arceus by a significant degree and indicates there's real interest in this kind of Pokemon experience. In this timeline, Game Freak sees that there's so much that they can do with the franchise. People love change, so they could turn their attention towards other new ideas that people have wanted for years and invest in them. Maybe that's voice acting, a deeper story, a greater focus on graphics and performance, or even more freedom for the player. Maybe they see that there are audiences for both styles of games, fans of the traditional combat and fans of the newer action RPG style. But this can only happen if it sells very well, if Game Freak sees that there's a real audience for this. And if it doesn't, if Z-A is a complete flop or even just does okay, it would be a much less exciting timeline. Because their consumer base made something very clear. Some experiments are fun, but nothing will ever replace the core turn-based formulaic Pokemon format that we all know. And to be honest, I think that this is the most likely outcome. Even if it slightly outsells Legends Arceus and turns into a pretty successful game, is it going to touch the figures of the mainline games? Will it even come within 10 million units? Because if not, what incentive do they have to switch up the formula? We'll just see the same old format we always do and people will probably continue to buy it. But what if I said that none of this really matters? Think about it. Let's say Z-A does fail. Let's say everybody hates it, the absolute worst case scenario. Game Freak sees that nobody appreciated their innovation and goes right back to pumping out the same games that they always do. Did you catch that? The same games that they always do. The worst case for Z-A's future is already what we have right now. The franchise already is stagnant. They use the same formula every time, relegating any significant level of innovation to the Legends subseries. So if Z-A were to fail, what would we lose? The Legends subseries, which is the only place they're actually allowed to experiment, would probably die, and that would be a major loss. But the mainline series itself would be in no worse a state than it already is. The unspoken threat that we'd be punished for not supporting innovation is completely empty. And once you realize that, it completely shifts the burden of responsibility. The way I've framed it so far has been from their perspective. If we don't like the new innovation, they'll go back to what works. The ball is in our court. If we want to see new ideas in Pokemon games, we need to support them. but it's not on us, it's on them. We know it's not on us because every time they actually offer innovation, we've rewarded them. It's never been about a lack of innovation. As I said in my last video, we liked the wild area in Pokémon Sword and Shield, we loved the open world in Legends Arceus, and despite all of its flaws, we appreciated the open world in Scarlet and Violet. The problem is not that innovation is scary and makes us less willing to buy the games. It's that innovation is relegated to a sub-series that will never have the same reach as the cultural event that is a mainline Pokémon release. So it does not fall to us to support innovation in the Pokémon series. It falls to Game Freak to make a game good enough that it allows them to see it. If they release a game that is so different from the usual Pokémon formula and it's an overwhelming success, they'll finally see that there's more to the concept than the same tired formula they've been pushing all this time. Pokémon Legends Z to A is a super cool innovation. I cannot wait to see how it plays when it comes out, and I'm psyched to feel like I'm actually in the anime that I grew up with. But my point isn't really about Pokémon Legends Z to A. It doesn't matter if the innovation is an open world or real-time combat or something else entirely. It just matters that there is innovation and that Game Freak is ambitious enough to actively pursue it. Like I said, Pokémon is the biggest media franchise in the world. Their games should do that title justice. There shouldn't just be ways for Game Freak to make even more money. They should be opportunities to push the genre forward. I don't know if Z to A will succeed or fail. It looks really promising and everything I've heard makes it sound like it's going to be pretty awesome. But I really have no idea if this style of combat is going to be something that the series incorporates into the mainline games or not. I just hope that this game does well enough that Game Freak sees innovation as not only good for the series, but a profitable venture. Because, as I said, it is. We've proven it time and time again. We reward innovation at every turn, and we can only hope that the success of a game as radically different as this one is finally enough to make them see that too. But what do you think? Is Pokémon Legends Z to A the start of an exciting, innovative new era of Pokémon, or is it just a blip before we return to the usual stagnation of the series? I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Also, if you've made it this far in the video, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed. It only takes a second and it makes a huge difference. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.